Before we jump into our topic today, there's a couple of quick announcements. I'm going to change the length of your paper because Canvas is finally cooperating with me, so the prompt should be up. But I'm going to change it to 5 pages or 2.5 pages, single-spaced. So I'm going to cut it in half because it's not your all's fault that Lincoln wouldn't let me into the computer. However, if you would prefer not to write a final paper, I also have an offer for you. As you guys know, Wednesday, the Chief Justice is coming to speak with us. There's this lovely flyer that was on this desk, and also you'll see it throughout campus. But I can't remember what they wrote. But she's going to be here tomorrow, Wednesday, to speak with our class at 8 a.m. Anybody who comes to class, asks some questions, and writes a, 1-page or about 500-word reflection paper will not have to do the final paper.
Is that this Wednesday? Or?
This Wednesday, the 22nd. So the requirements for that are come to class, ask at least one intelligent question, and write a reflection. And you can substitute that for the final paper. But if you're not in class, then I can't give you any credit for that. And so for online students, this is going to be a little bit of a difference. I will give you the same offer, but that means you have to come into class if you want to take advantage of that. So my apologies if you're taking this from like Fort Leonard Wood or something like that. I'll put that out on Canvas as an announcement for everybody too. But you have your choice between A or B. So let's jump into this. Oh, and last thing, I will take roll at about 5 minutes till 8. That way we don't interrupt the judge's remarks. So if you want to be here, you need to be on time. Chapter 14 is what we're going into now. This is where we're going to start talking about making public policy, or how government decides what to do. The big idea for today is that public policy is not just what government does, it is the result of conflict, institution, bargaining, expertise, elections, budgets, and trade-offs. Policy is not just about solving problems, it is about deciding which problems count, who gets heard, what government can afford, and who wins or loses from the decision. So last class, we talked about how Congress, wait, no we didn't. Okay, we're going to connect the institutions that we've talked about. Congress makes the laws, the president is going to execute the laws, but also pushes priority and supervises the executive branch. The bureaucracy implements policy, and then courts interpret and review policy. Interest groups, parties, elections, and public opinion all shape what government actually chooses to do. So while all these different institutions exist, none of them are existing within a vacuum. Chapter 14 is where we start Chapter 14 is where the whole course starts coming together. Public policy is what all these institutions actually produce. So at the beginning, we had the foundational stuff. Now we've talked about some of the mechanics. This is kind of tying it all together, just in time for the end of the semester. So what actually is public policy? Public policy is what government chooses to do or not do about a public problem. There are 2 things here that you need to think about. First is action. This is passing laws, spending money, regulating, and creating programs. The other is inaction, because it is also public policy to not do something. Inaction is choosing not to regulate, not to spend, or not to intervene. So here are some quick categories of public policy that we might think about. They're just broad buckets that things might fall into. 1, taxation. 2, education, healthcare, crime, immigration, environment, housing, social welfare, and economic regulation. With each of these things, you can think of different things where the government has said affirmatively, we are going to do something, or, nah, we're good, we're not going to do anything. And one of the things that's interesting is public policy shifts. So you can see this happening in real time with certain things. If we take, for example, education, a big push up until recently was trying to make sure that we had the best education ever. We have things like No Child Left Behind. At a federal level, we had big policy pushes. However, the current administration wants to prioritize state choice. And in doing so, what is happening to the Department of Education? They're trying to shut it down. So on one hand, we had activism. We had the federal government trying to push different things. Now we have inaction, where the federal government is actively trying to shut things down. Policy is not only big national debates, it affects ordinary life. A policy choice is not always a dramatic law. Sometimes the policy choice is a budget line, an emergency rule, or a decision not to act. So what's the policy-making process? Here's the basic policy-making process. First, we're going to recognize a problem. Someone defines a condition as a public problem. Can you guys think of things that are public problems right now? I know you've always got one, at least.
Gun control.
Gun control, yeah. For some people, it's a public problem. For some people, it's not. But if we as a government identify that gun control is a public problem, that's step 1. Step 2, agenda setting. The problem gets attention from officials, media, voters, interest groups, or institutions. So the second point is that if you and I identify that, hey, this thing is a problem, but we don't get any traction with anybody else, it's really not going to move anywhere. Gun control is a pretty big problem. Gun control is something that is in the media a lot, especially since in today's news, I just already read that there was the largest mass shooting since 2024 when a dad killed his 6 kids, 1 additional child, and himself or something. Very sad news. But gun control is something that has gotten that traction in the media. 3, policy formulation. Government actors debate possible solutions. We see this happen sometimes with, hey, we're going to have red flag laws, or we're going to say that you can't have this particular piece of weaponry, or this particular modification to a weapon. Adoption, a law, regulation, executive action, court ruling, or budget decision is made. And then 5, implementation. The bureaucracies and other actors carry out the policy. 6 is evaluation. People ask whether it works, failed, cost too much, created side effects, or needs revision. And then 7th is the policy feedback. The policy changes future politics by creating winners, losers, expectations, and new interest groups. This is not a clean assembly line. We can move back and forth from phase to phase. We can think that we're at that agenda setting phase only to go back and refine the problem. Or we can think that we're at the evaluation phase where we're asking whether the solution worked or failed when we go back and write a new law down at step 3. You can think about these as 3 phases, but don't think about it as an assembly line. It's not clean. The policy process is a useful map, but real policy making is messier. Steps overlap, actors fight, and sometimes implementation changes the policy itself. So we can think about different things that I'll let you guys choose one of these 6 things to talk through it with. Student loan policy, education funding, health insurance, policy reform, environmental regulations, and housing affordability. Does anybody have one of these they want to pick? All right, I'm going to talk broadly about health insurance then. So if we think about health insurance, and this is where it gets kind of messy, because today, what's the problem with health insurance? It's really expensive, it doesn't cover everything, and it's driving up the price of healthcare. You can't go into the doctor and pay your $20 and see the doctor. That appointment's going to cost like $2,000, but there's going to be some bargain down rate of like $500 for the health insurance people, and then the insurance company will pay like $300 of it, and they'll just forgive $100 of it. Now you pay $100 to go see the doctor or something crazy like that. And it's this convoluted mess of stuff. But how did we get here? Well, way back in the day, during World War II to be precise, they capped salaries. They said you can only pay people up to this amount, because with everybody overseas fighting a war, the incentive on businesses to offer as much money as they could to hire people was huge. If you can just outpay the next guy, you can steal the workers from them. So to limit that, they said, all right, we're going to put a cap on all salaries. You can only pay people this much. But to get around that, companies said, well, that's fine, but we're going to pay for your anything medical you need. And thus began the concept of health insurance. The insurance industry was born. And for a while it worked all right. But people being people, all of a sudden it went from being kind of a not-for-profit thing or a co-op to how do we make money from this thing? And that industry then fed into the hospital industry, which fed back into the insurance industry, and back and forth they went, trying to figure out how do we maximize profits for both sides of this. And I'm oversimplifying it, and there's lots of other moving parts here, but now the problem is that as people who are going to need insurance soon, we want to not pay very much and also be covered when things happen. When I was switching jobs, there was a month that we needed to be on insurance from the marketplace. For my little family, it was $1,000 per month, and we had a $10,000 deductible. What does that mean? It means that before the insurance company paid anything, we would have to pay $10,000. So if we had that insurance for a year, before it would have any benefit at all, we would have to pay $22,000. And that seems insane to me. The fact that they even sell such a product seems absolutely nuts. So we've identified the problem. Who puts it on the agenda? Well, this becomes really interesting because in today's world, it's decreasingly kind of us being able to do it on our own. I think we still can. I think it takes more effort. But there's a really interesting book, which I'm sure I've mentioned in here before, called Bowling Alone. And it hypothesizes that air conditioning was the death of American society. Because people used to like hang out outside when the weather starts getting nice. They'd go do activities together. There were civic organizations that they'd join. But because we have air conditioning and we don't want to expose ourselves to heat, people stay inside and they watch TV and they don't do things with their neighbors. So they don't have the conversations sharing these big ideas. If we expand that to the smartphone, it's amazing and terrible at the same time, because for something to get on the agenda, we have to get big people to pay attention, or we have to get it trending in social media. So if we think that health insurance is an issue, who's going to put it on the agenda? Well, the insurance company's talking about it a little bit, the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO got it talked a little bit. But we don't hear very much about it right now. So is it on the agenda? Maybe, maybe not. And how do we get it there? That's an ever-evolving thing at this point. What solutions are proposed? Well, believe it or not, Josh Hawley and Elizabeth Warren have co-sponsored legislation to try and limit the amount of profit that insurance companies can make. That's kind of cool. So, you know, that is one solution. Does it have any traction? I don't know. I haven't read the bill yet, so I don't really know how effective it will be or not. But that is a solution. Another solution would be to have universal health care. If the government is the one that is basically stepping in and paying for all of your medical expenses, then we completely kill the insurance industry. We eliminate the problem by basically having it so that there is no reason for it to exist at all. On the flip side to that, the argument is that if we do something like that, what incentive is there to be at the top of your field? If the government is setting all the rates, why would they set the rates to disfavor themselves? So if you're sitting in here thinking, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up, what kind of doctor are you going to become? If they're compensating general practitioners about the same as they're compensating pediatric neurosurgeons, why would you do the additional 12 years of a surgical residency and then 6 years of surgical residency and then a fellowship on top of that to get that pediatric specialization if you're not going to make any more?
Well,
Maybe you're just really into it, and that's awesome. But that's the argument against universal health care, is that it's going to disincentivize people doing their best work.
the argument against that would be that we need unskilled laborers as well. And if they already have no health insurance on most of their stuff, I mean, who's gonna stock the shelves at the Aldi?
Right.
Those people are more likely to actually get injured
Yeah.
and need that health insurance more than someone with a desk job.
Yeah. And so what most capitalists would say to that, and again, I'm trying really hard to present both sides to this because I've certainly got my opinion, but I don't want to taint you guys with the way I think about it. The counter argument to, hey, we need to provide universal health care so we take care of the workforce we need, which is unskilled labor, is that the capitalists would say that the free market will take care of it. If it becomes such a problem or such a burden on the economy that we need more unskilled labor and healthcare is the obstacle to that, then people recognizing this will provide healthcare to take care of people. In practice, do we think it's going to work? I don't think so. And I am going to let my views slip a little bit here because the whole concept of trickle-down economics or letting the free market decide, I don't think really does what we want it to do in a society. And I think I talked about this in here. To me, having no government rule or no regulations at all is tantamount to anarchy. And I believe that if we have anarchy, one of the things that happens is basically like Lord of the Flies. Has anybody read that book? Have you read the book? I can't see if you're nodding your head or not. I'm
It's
sorry.
required reading for usually, at least it was when I was still.
It was when I was there too. It has been when all my siblings went through, but I always ask because somehow some people seem to skip it. But for those of you who don't know, you can read a synopsis on Wikipedia or something. But long story short, if we have anarchy, who's going to protect the weak? Who's going to make sure that we play nice in the sandbox with each other? And so this concept of just let the free market figure it out kind of scares me a little bit as somebody who, because of government protections, I'm here. And I don't harp on this a lot, but I do want to say that before the Americans with Disabilities Act, I may not have been employable. But, now because they can't be like, oh, this blind guy can't do anything, it's a lot harder for companies to dismiss me just because of that. So who is going to adopt the policy? This would, if we wanted to fix healthcare, this is going to have to be a big federal issue. It would have to kind of be a across the board fix. So adopting the policy would most likely have to be Congress. Who implements it? The executive branch and the bureaucracy. How would we know if it worked? Well, we would know if it worked if healthcare costs went down, but at the same time, access to healthcare did not decrease significantly. So key players in policymaking. This should mostly be review for you guys because we've talked about the different policymakers here. But the main actors we have are Congress that passes laws, writes budgets, conducts oversight, and responds to constituents and interest groups. The president, who sets agendas, proposes budgets, directs executive branch action, and uses public leadership and administrative tools to kind of control that narrative. The bureaucracy that implements laws, writes rules, applies expertise, and exercises discretion, and courts that interpret laws, review constitutionality, and affect implementation through rulings. We also have interest groups that provide information, lobby, mobilize supporters, and monitor implementation. And finally, public opinion and elections. Shape incentives, create pressure, and determine who holds power. Has anyone, last night I did a political survey related to 3 constitutional amendments that are going to maybe be on the November ballot for Missouri. Public opinion, I think, I'm not sure how much it matters, to be honest with you, with some of the things that are coming up. But I'm hoping that public opinion really kind of sways some of the legislators to change how they're doing things. For example, we talked in here about the Missouri legislature wanting to do away with or to significantly alter initiative petition reform. This would make it harder for the people to do things that the legislature would have to follow. Similarly, in 2024, Missouri voters, in a pretty wide margin, put a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to an abortion in the state. The Missouri legislature has decided that they don't want that, and so they're trying to, they have a constitutional amendment to undo that decision. And the other one that's on there is, you guys may or may not be aware of the fact that Missouri has passed some very gerrymandered maps for how we elect representatives to the United States House of Representatives. And the language on that is extremely confusing. I don't think that language will actually make it on the ballot, but as of right now, the language is something like, do you approve of the such and such general sessions bill during extraordinary section in 2025 to replace gerrymandered maps to reflect the way people are actually voting in the state of Missouri, or something like that. And this language is very confusing because it has several double negatives in it. Like, do you support this that does this to do this to do this? But basically what it's asking at the moment is, do you agree with the gerrymandered maps? And this is the sort of thing that, like, a lot of people are probably going to say, yeah, hell yeah, I agree with this. We need to fix the gerrymandered maps. Is it going to pass? Who knows? Does it mean anything if people don't understand it? Not really. But here's where I'm at with it, just to put all my cards on the table. I don't really care left versus right in this issue. But I think anytime we're fooling around with things like gerrymandering, it's a dangerous precedent to set, because then what's the next guy going to do? And as we keep talking about, the pendulum always swings. So if we do something like, yes, the Republicans are in power, let's go ahead and redraw the maps to favor Republicans. Well, at some point, the Democrats will be in power again. That's the way the world works. And when they are, if we have already broken that seal, if people have set the precedent of doing that, then why would the Democrats not go and redraw all the maps too? I think it's best to just do it in the way that we always have done it, which is to wait till the census comes out, redraw boundaries based on that. But, left versus right, that's the fight I don't want to wade into. All right, anyway, no single actor makes policy alone. Policy is usually the result of many institutions pushing, blocking, bargaining, and implementing at the same time. All right, I'm going to fly through the rest of this stuff because I have a call docket I've got to get to. We're going to talk really quick about budgeting and policy. Budget is policy. This is the most practical thing we're going to talk about today. A budget is not just accounting, it is a statement of priorities. If you want to know what government values, look at what it funds. Spending decisions shape policy, taxing decisions shape policy, deficits and debt create future constraints, and budgeting forces trade-offs. I'm going to skip that. Regarding that, really quick, we can talk about just a couple things. Recently, we have heard that the White House is asking for an additional $1 trillion in military spending, while at the same time wanting to cut things like Social Security, well, not Social Security, but Social Security unemployment. This is the sort of thing that kind of indicates where priorities lie. We want to spend more on the military, but we don't want to fund as much things like Medicaid. Similarly, we can look at how we tax to show priorities. In the state of Missouri, one of the things on the ballot, one of the initiatives they wanted to talk to me about during this fun survey, was whether or not I support repealing the income tax. If we repeal the income tax, this has a major benefit for who? What class? It has the major benefit for the rich. And the reason for that is because the government's going to get its money. They'll get its money through property taxes and sales taxes and things like that. Those of us that have to live here and have to go to the grocery store and everything will still be paying taxes, perhaps even more. But if we get rid of income tax, we get rid of that thing that would disproportionately tax the rich. Is it fun? Is it okay if we disproportionately tax the rich, or would you rather pay more as a lower or middle class citizen? To me, I think if you have the means, you should pay more taxes, but that's just me. By Missouri doing this, again, they show where the government's values lie. They are more fond of the rich than they are of
the poor.
Yes. So that covers what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Tomorrow is where public policy, we're going to talk about where public policy meets politics. It is the result of choices and problems, priorities, budgets, institutions, and trade-offs. We'll cover economic goals, inflation, unemployment, growth, taxes, spending, regulations, and who government should help during economic stress. This is a fun one because there's two sides to this coin. One says that we should help the lowest classes. The other, the trickle-down economics theory, is that we should give massive incentives and breaks to the very rich, because then they will spend their excess money and thus stimulate economic growth, because their windfall will trickle down to everybody else. That's all for today. Any questions before I end the recording?
Is trickle down economics just give money to rich people and screw over everyone else? Because that's what it sounds like.
That is what it sounds like. I have that belief. I'm not sure. There are people who think this really works, and I'm sure that there is some research to support both conclusions. But to me, it just doesn't make sense. But that's me. You guys can certainly conclude differently. And again, I encourage you with everything to think about it for yourselves. Other questions? All right, remember, I want you guys all to be here if you're going to come to class on Wednesday before 8 a.m. because we have the judge coming to visit us. And if you want to replace that reflection paper with your final paper, you need to be in class. I will take roll at the beginning. If you are late and you don't have an extremely compelling reason, if you think back to the various levels of scrutiny, that's a reference to that. But if you're late and you don't have an extremely compelling reason, then I will not let you take advantage of that offer to substitute your final paper for a reflection paper over what the judge has to say. All right, that's all for today. I'm going to end the recording and then we'll take roll, potentially.